great place to ask questions. And when I do this, I really like to offer that opportunity. So if you're comfortable, are you before? Any raise of hands? Any front end? Yeah, awesome. Good, good. So I think this is also a good group, good meeting for those on the front end. You've got some veterans in here. You've got some people that can offer some great information and experiences, and that is incredibly important, I think. So that's going to be something that's beneficial about our group tonight as well.
Is it plugged in?
Yeah, it's plugged in. I don't know how to make this.
You know what I'm gonna. No, you're great. No, thank you for doing that. You know what I'll do is I'll just kind of move around. I'll roam, if that's okay. I'll kind of roam around the room and give you all an opportunity to hear me a little bit. But I do want to kind of start continue our group by saying the topic for today is this relationship with food, right? This concept of a relationship. We all have relationships with our families, our loved ones, people we care about. And I always say you can probably get 20 people together who like and do 20 different things, but you can get them all in one restaurant and they all can be together. So food really brings us together from the time we're very young. I always kind of joke and say you never got a chance to make the menu when you were 2 or 3 years old, right? You ate what you were given. So a lot of those likes and dislikes are connected to that relationship. Test.
Yeah.
How's that? Up a little bit? Better?
That's good.
Much better? Not yelling at you? Is that good? Okay, awesome, great. That relationship with food, so we all can come together and have those experiences. So what I really want to highlight tonight is it's not just people who do this surgery that can or may develop an unhealthy relationship with food. It's a very easy thing to develop a relationship to. But the question is, as you go through this process and you're trying to understand why we have this relationship with food, we have to look at ways that it developed and why it's there in some of those early experiences. I was talking to someone today, they have great workout equipment at home and it's all set up, and like many of us who do that, we don't always use it. So then my follow-up question was, did you have that equipment at home growing up when you were a kid? And most of us didn't, and this person didn't either. So what a lot of us are trying to do is establish a new thought or new relationship about food and try to do it in a way that's going to work with your surgery. And I would imagine, and I want this to kind of be a little bit discussional today or conversational, is I would think that the majority of people change their relationship with food after this surgery. Is that correct? But then are there times, depending on how far post you may be, that some of those old thoughts or those old relationships come back? Right? And so in some cases, we see that. So I think this evening what we want to try to accomplish is ways to kind of change that, but how we can prevent that. I think one of our recent groups talked about preparing for the holidays. You can't really prepare for the Royals, though. Didn't they do well? Right? It's exciting. And it gets so exciting, so I've been talking to a lot of folks about the Royals a little bit. Why? Because we want to get together and celebrate them and celebrate their success. They're playing about 7 o'clock at night. Guess what goes on around 7 o'clock at night? Summertime, right? So there's a lot of things that happen that contribute to the choices that we make with food. So I feel like what we need to kind of talk about tonight is how we can get a healthy relationship with food. And I bet a lot of you have found that healthy relationship. Many of you probably had a pretty healthy relationship with food, but there's genetics involved or there's other factors involved that contribute to why we gain weight. I'm meet a lot of caretakers. I meet a lot of hardworking, dedicated, committed people who give so much to their jobs and their families, but maybe in return don't give as much back to ourselves. And so you always hear me probably talk, if you've met with me before, about self-care. You know, what are you doing for yourself, and what are those types of things that you do? And a lot of times in the evening, you've had a long day, you come back home, it's a lot easier. That thing that you do for yourself is food. So what we want to also do then is think about what else you could do. What are the alternatives to have a more healthy relationship with food? I wouldn't mind knowing if someone here has found something different to do to give themselves some other thing to do besides gathering joy and pleasure from food. Not that it can't be after surgery, but maybe people have found something different. Has anybody else found something different to do?
Well, I started out this morning at 7 o'clock and ran all day, got home at 3 and was tired and took a nap for an hour. I used to never do anything like that.
Right. Well,
It was great.
It is good, and it's different, right?
Yeah.
So one thing you might think about, just a comment on that, is if you live the same life before surgery, or after surgery that you did before surgery, you live the same life after surgery that you did before surgery, you may not fully optimize that. And last I checked, we all need some rest. We all need some sleep. In fact, a colleague of mine says, what we often need is not food as a pick-me-up, but we need rest. But when is there time to really rest during the day? So then in some workplaces, people might run to their vending machines or their snack machines and get energy, get the sugars or the carbs to get that last 2 or 3 hours of the day. Not that we can all rest, because they sometimes find other things to do, but it's a good alternative. Another hand up.
I just keep myself busy all the time.
Stay occupied.
I keep occupied.
Yep.
I have a lot of dogs. I walk my dogs all the time.
Yep. I think that's important. Yes.
I signed up for a knitting class.
Signed up for a knitting
Yeah,
class.
I
That's
thought, well,
awesome.
if I watch TV, keep my hands busy. rather than
Absolutely.
focus on it.
And we call that actually kinesthetic. So when you're moving your hands and you got your eyes, you're very focused. It really distracts you, and then time flies by. And so if you were having a food thought, it probably goes away pretty quickly. That's good.
This is probably bad, but I find myself playing on games on my phone a lot more.
Okay.
So I'll just,
Yeah.
and not even into TV, because TV makes me hungry because of the commercials and stuff, so I've just been resolving myself, distracting it.
Right. When we have our awesome dietitian here, I think what she would tell you is that if you have a distraction when you're eating, you could eat more, right? So I think we often try to not have too much distraction like a TV when we're eating. And you're right, these phones, I mean, they're like computers. We're carrying these little computers around. They have all these little things on there that could distract us or help us. There's a lot of healthy apps, applications out
Yeah.
there. So that's a great one. I saw another hand up.
I had read a lot of articles about coloring and how that can be real therapeutic and relieve stress. So I bought a lot of those adult coloring books, and that's really helpful.
Yeah, that's a great one. Someone showed me one of those this week as well, and showed me some beautiful artwork. But the artwork kind of for them, I think, was the bonus.
Yeah.
It was the process of creating that was so healthy and so distracting. And I would encourage you to kind of think about those kinds of concepts, because creating things like that can be incredibly beneficial. Didn't want to miss any hands. Have I seen their hands? But I think this is the concept, and I can just already tell in this room you guys are getting it. You guys are figuring it out. Now what we also want to do at some point is talk about if we're hitting any roadblocks. So I think this is a great, safe, good place to talk about some of those things. So as we kind of progress forward, we'll do that. But I wanted to do something I think kind of special for you is I have a relationship with UMKC, and I'm lucky enough to have a doctoral student with me tonight, and she was just going to spend 5 minutes or so talking about a little bit of a possible codependency that we can develop with food. There is some research that talks about that there can be a codependency that develops, and it often develops for people that might be busy, on the go, occupied. So as a part of this discussion tonight, I just wanted to offer the mic over to Lauren, and she's a 5th-year UMKC student, and she's going to talk a little bit about a codependency with food. Then I'm going to jump right back in, and we'll continue our discussion.
So can you all hear me? Okay. So I did a little bit of research in preparation for talking to you all tonight about codependency. I'm wondering if that's a familiar word to people. Have you guys, yeah? So when I think of that word, I often think about that in the context of relationships with other, oh, you
Videoing
Oh,
you.
gosh, okay. I often think about that word in the context of relationships with other people. So you can become, you can have a codependent relationship with another person, and can kind of play either role, whether you're enabling a not so helpful behavior for another person, or you're on the receiving end of that. But we can also think about codependency with food. And so having an unhealthy relationship with food kind of becomes the codependent activity that we engage in that becomes more important to us than kind of meeting our basic needs or our emotional needs. We kind of replace those things with food, and it sort of serves that function for us. There's lots of reasons why we can develop that sort of a relationship with food. And at this point, maybe that's not quite so important to focus on, but rather focusing on sort of how we move away from that unhealthy relationship with food. And I think one of the most important things that people can do when trying to make that type of change is just increasing your awareness about why you're eating, or maybe the food choices you're making, and sort of those emotional connections that food might have for you. And that to me is often kind of the first helpful step, is really kind of tuning into that awareness, and then trying to make changes from there. So, do you have stuff to add about that specifically?
She's pretty smart. I think that I appreciate her doing that because the codependency components, I guess I would want to say, could come back, right? We're all pretty realistic folks here, and we recognize that these are great tools, great tools, and it's such a privilege to be a part of this program because I see you all do so many great things with this tool. The issue, though, I think, is if we've had a pattern for a number of years, the potential for that pattern to return under a time of stress, strain, loss, grief, whatever uncomfortable emotion you probably can think of, the potential or probability of some of those old behaviors coming back as a way maybe to compensate for those emotions, which in some cases it was food. If those old emotions come back and we experience them, the brain might think, well, what about food? Why does the brain want to think about food? Well, number one, the brain needs food. It really does. And our blood needs food. Two primary resources in our blood is oxygen and sugar. Sugar, right? That's a tough one. We'll talk about sugar in a little bit, but I think what we need is we definitely need the food, but why do we need it so much? And why do sometimes we need to find other things to do after the surgery if we gathered and garnered a fair amount of pleasure from food, especially to prevent that dependency or codependency that Lauren was referring to. Well, there's this little part of our brain by the brainstem called the hypothalamus. And to hopefully not bore you too much, I'm just going to talk about this for a minute. There's functional MRI studies that we do that you can watch people when they're doing something enjoyable or pleasurable in some of these studies. So they looked at people when they were eating. They're in this back room, they're eating, they're kind of hooked up, and they're looking at these functional MRIs, and that part of their brain is lighting up like the sun. It is, and people are like, what in the world is that guy doing in there? He looks like he's having the time of his life. Well, he's eating food. And I would suggest that in most cases, that when people have enjoyable, pleasurable foods that might relate back to their childhood or their experiences, maybe a favorite town you've been to, a favorite place you've been to, it lights up that part of your brain. So one of the things that we do with this great tool and this great surgery is we think about what are other things that we can do if you change your relationship with food that you can do for pleasure, for joy, knitting, other examples. What are some things that you can think about? And I wouldn't even mind offering the opportunity for the group to say, what are some other pleasurable things that you found to replace food? Is there anything that someone has come across? Anything new? Yeah.
It's not so much new, but I get more into it now, but photography,
Mm-hmm.
it takes time for me to process the photos, and I've just really chosen to take more interest in some of the more detailed things I can do
Right.
with photography, and so that kind of takes my mind away from even the thought of food, because I am thinking and looking at the photo itself and post-processing.
Healthy distraction. Number one, it's an art form, photography. Requires amount of focus depending on whatever you photograph. But it is a great, and obviously if it's something that you enjoy, then that's what works, right? And that's the key there. Any other examples? That's a great one. Any other examples? Laura?
I had an example from a patient, sign language.
Sign,
We
yeah.
talked about it.
Okay.
And she was having some trouble sleeping, I remember. And that was kind of the time that she would, eat something, a snack throughout the night or
Right.
late evening, right?
Right.
And then we talked about it. Let's find something within the perimeters, right? It's
Yes.
time you're at home, not much to do outside. And as a follow-up, she said to me, I brought you something. I wanted to show you what I came up with.
Yeah.
And she brought the book. And she told me that she learned sign language during all her childhood for some reason. And of course, once you get into college and you start working, etc., those kind of skills kind of get lost. And
Sure.
she decided to volunteer for children and help children. And she said, I got to practice. It takes practice to get back and speak with it. So I kind of go in the library, and whatever I read, I do my sign language in front of the mirror whenever I don't feel that sleepy. And that gets me sleepy again. And that's how I do. I have my book next to me. I do my sign language. It's my time, 1 hour, 45 minutes. That's it.
Relaxing.
Just wanted to bring it up.
That's your dietitian, ladies and gentlemen, isn't she? That's great. That's a great example. That's a great example of
Not
something.
everybody knows how to say language, but if you have a skill,
Well, I like what you bring up though, because is it fair to say that when you do this surgery, you have more energy, you have more excitement, more motivation to do certain things, and that doesn't always have to be just running down the sidewalk. It could be learning something new, taking on a new. Maybe you would love to learn photography, and this is an opportunity to do that. So that's really the meat of this topic, I think, is finding those other things to do that interest, that excite you, that you've always thought about. And because when you don't have as much energy as we all want to before surgery, it's hard to think about doing anything really additional that would take any potential extra energy, even like learning something that isn't really physically draining, but maybe mentally takes energy. So that's a great example. I think I also saw some other hands. Yes.
I buy to resell on
buy and resell on
And so
eBay.
it's turned into a business.
Yeah.
So I do very well now. I've
Right.
been doing it increasingly the last 4 years.
And has it increased more as a part of your post-operative experience with surgery? As the
Well,
buying and
since-
selling
well,
on
since
eBay?
I'm not working,
Yeah.
to me this is like a job.
Yeah.
So I basically get up at 5 in the morning and start my eBay.
Yeah.
And then there's certain days that I go by, I purchase certain places I go. So it's exciting for me. It's exciting. Sunday, it's Monday.
Yeah.
I go here, I go there.
You all impress me so much with, I hear those situations a lot. Just to comment on it, then we'll continue with some hands. But it's so exciting to see people do something either new or different or add on to something. And again, I think when you are feeling more capable of doing those things, it's easier to, this is something positive, doing the surgery. Why not do something else positive? Positive can build on other positives. Yeah.
I think to get outside of the house and do for others, like volunteer work, and then if you could also do things inside, like if you had a hobby such as knitting or sewing, making things for different organizations that have a lot of things that you can, do that handwork for, or going outside the home and doing volunteer work that way too.
So just a comment on, there's so many other things to do, whether it's for other organizations or other places, and so I think that's another wonderful way just to stay occupied and to stay busy, but also to do something really rewarding and beneficial.
Yeah.
And I like you brought up the indoor stuff. I mean, yeah, it's a little dark outside now, right? Not last week it wasn't as dark, but time changes, seasons change, and sometimes we have to evolve and change as that happens. We can't control what's happening outside, but we might have a plan B or a plan C. This is a thing we do in the spring. This is a thing we do in the winter. Those are good things to do too. I think I saw another hand. I don't want to miss anybody. Yeah.
One of the things that I decided to do was my daughter, who's 20 years old, was a very talented barrel racer. She showed horses. Well, I've sat through many, many, many horse clinics as, of course, a spectator. So I decided, since I've lost all this weight, that I was going to buy myself 2 horses and I'm going to show them.
Nice.
And absolutely no one believed that I would do this. So I met a man in South Carolina, and I bought myself a mare and a colt. And I drove to South Carolina, and I picked them up. And I got in my truck, and I hooked the trailer up. And my husband said, "Are you really going to do this?" I said, "Well, I've already paid for them. I'm doing this." And my daughter, who's 20 years old, who was the barrel racer, who was really the talent of our family doing this, she said, "Mom, have you gone insane?" And I said, "No, I'm going to do this, and I'm going to beat you in the show ring, Heather." And so I repaired, I had the trailer repaired, I put the mats in. I sat through all these lessons. I paid all this money. I learned something along the way. And so I drove out to South Carolina, and I picked this mare full up. Now, I was scared the whole time because I didn't do the handling per se. This was a long trip, and what if something happened along the way? So I made sure the truck and trailer was in real good shape. But, I came back, and my daughter, who just had a baby, he's going to be a year old next week. Boy, she was at my house the minute I pulled into the driveway, and so was about 20 of her friends. And I unloaded the horse. I said, she goes, "Let me get it." I go, "I got this. I got this." Okay? And so I unloaded the mare and the baby, and I built the fence. I built it. I have other horses, but this was my present to myself.
That's awesome.
So they keep me really busy. And that's what I do. I get up at 5 o'clock in the morning, and I exercise. I hired a trainer. He comes out twice a week. And by golly, I'm going to ride this year.
That's great.
Not everyone. Knitting is much safer, so is photography. But it really I committed to it, and then I had to follow through. So, anyway.
And it's so, follow through. Absolutely.
Having that goal at the end of the road.
Definitely.
That's one thing you have to reach out.
And it's a great point. Laura's talking about accountability and goals. and it's, if you're on the before surgery side, or any point in the after surgery side, it's okay to, and it's good to set goals and to set, where you want to be or things you want to do and how you want to do them. It really can add to your process. We want you to have great experience and a great process. We call this not an operation so much, but a transformation. And when you hear about these things that people are doing, or it makes me think about what Lauren said about these relationships, our love of horses, our love of photography, our love of knitting, our love of all these other wonderful examples that we're hearing. That's how you really develop, maybe the word is better, balance. Sometimes after long weeks or busy weeks or months, you're working a lot, you kind of can get out of balance. I imagine y'all still, for the most part, have to keep working, do your jobs, feed your families, do all those things, feed the horses, do all these things that you need to do, right? And so how do you fit in living that healthy lifestyle, having that healthy relationship? You have to balance it, right? So I feel like that's something so many people are doing so well with. But again, sometimes that stress may come back up again. The emotions may come back up again. That part of your brain may fire up and want something pleasurable. The more you get into a routine, get into a structure, that really helps as well. So it reminds me of another word, and I want to keep this dialogue going because this is more fun for me doing it this way than me just talking to you, is awareness. Is there greater awareness now of being healthy? Is there greater awareness? Because we really feel that awareness, you're building, you're continuing, you're changing, you're relearning, right? But, I'm a right-handed person, probably like most people in the room. If I had to switch to lefty, I'd have to be really aware about that. Maybe that's not the best example, but it's pretty fair. Do you have a greater level of awareness now about what you do, how you live, what you eat? Yeah.
I would say that there's been a learning curve, and for me, the biggest learning curve was, and Laura and I have talked about this, learning how to size down the portions, because when you have the surgery, it's almost an immediate shift. With, you might have been able to eat 2 cups of food before and think nothing of it, and it didn't even make you burp, and then now it's like a half a cup and maybe a fourth a cup and you're done.
Yeah.
And so what helped me do that was I bought small containers, and I started setting my lunch up the night before in these small containers to help me kind of visualize and think about, hey, 2 containers and that's it. You really aren't going to have room for any more than that. So now that I got past that learning curve, and now I can kind of visualize and how much it is now the learning curve is trying to help the people that care about me learn that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well said.
Because they think they want me to succeed, so they think they can ask me out to dinner.
Right.
Yeah, they say, oh, we don't want to eat in front of you.
Right.
I don't care. I
Or where
can't
can
eat
you
that.
go? And my answer is, we can go anywhere. I can eat anything that doesn't eat me first. I'm just not going to eat very much of it.
Absolutely.
My
Right.
grandkids think it's really neat that I can eat what they eat.
Sure. Right. 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 At least the same portion, right? Exactly.
Well, I don't even eat near as much as they do.
Correct.
No, that's the
Right.
thing.
You guys are just so much more efficient than most people when you eat, because you listen to Laura and you say, I'm going to eat my protein first. I'm going to eat my vegetables second. My carbs is, okay, if there's a room, maybe a little bite or 2. You really learn. So there's learning, there's relearning, and I always look at Laura when I say this because there's pre-learning, right? So pre-learning is that reconditioning that we go through. And many of us, understandably so, when we do this, want to have surgery pretty soon. And sometimes the best advice to the person on the front end of surgery is utilizing that time to relearn and to recondition and be around all this wisdom in this room, and focus on how can I use this time to kind of study for my test. If that's what we did when we had a test, we'd study for it beforehand and probably help us get a better grade. So if you pre-learn, that can really help us as we maybe start to develop before surgery at least a healthier relationship with food. Yes, thanks, Laura. Oh, sorry, I didn't see it right there. Thank you. Yeah.
One of the things that I still do, and I started this before my surgery,
Okay.
is I have plates about this size.
Okay.
Instead of my dinner plate.
Right.
I continue to eat on that.
Yeah.
On those plates.
Yeah.
And my protein goes first. I leave the carbs away until I've ate my protein and my vegetables. And I had to learn that because I am a big carb cracker cookie person.
So you keep the carbs on a different plate?
I keep it on a bowl on the stove, and then if I am still,
I like
my
that.
protein and my
Yeah.
vegetable goes on my little plate, and I just take my time. My biggest problem, I think, is I have to have the TV on or radio or something, because I'm by myself.
Sure. Right. Right. Whatever works best for you, right? And that's a great idea, that you have that portion, right, Laura? That portion of carbs. Many of us, back in the day, we'd have the pot of carbs.
Yeah.
The pot of carbs was on the stove. Now you have a proper portion of carbs, right? So that's a wonderful example.
Well, that was my biggest problem, is I am a carb pasta, potato,
Right.
So if I make macaroni and cheese per se, even low fat, I can leave it on the stove. But 9 times out of 10, it'll go in the refrigerator and I won't touch it. I'll save it for my daughter. But I'm a label reader now. I mean, I read everything I buy, everything.
Stay informed, stay educated, right? Yeah, and
Everything.
that's such a great point. I know Laura does a lot on the front end too and encouraging that, so that's wonderful. Yeah. Yes.
I'll admit it. I mean, before surgery, I didn't read labels. I didn't plan. I ate what tasted good.
Correct.
Lots of it.
Correct.
So, I mean, for me, it's just what she said, reading labels and actually planning what's nutritious. That's a huge shift.
I love, yeah, make sure I get you. I want to comment on that real quick and I'll come right back. Why don't we choose what's tasty? Well, okay, so maybe some of you will go out to eat tonight or sometime in the next 5-6 days, and you'll go to your restaurant, they'll say, what would you like? Well, geez, there's a lot of things I like. Right?
And we don't stop liking
And we don't stop really liking them, exactly. There's a lot of things. So sometimes we have to think about what we should have, maybe hopping on the website before you go
I
to
used
that
to grocery
restaurant.
shop on impulse and never even
Correct.
have a list. And so
Right.
it's
Do you stay
totally-
on the outskirts of the store? I guess
For
we're
the
supposed
most
to
part, yeah.
stay on the
There's a few
outskirts,
things, yeah.
right? Pre-processed things are in the aisles, and so sometimes we hop on the websites, go check maybe your niece or nephew's having a birthday, and you go on and you want to check to see what's that menu look like. Because if you get to the restaurant, and I think this is even true what people have told me post-surgery is, if the hunger catches me at the wrong time, it could be a little slippery slope. But the surgery definitely helps us. But if you go in with a preset notion in your mind, hey, this is what I'm ordering. I don't even need to look at this menu. This is what I'm going to have, not what I want.
And the more it tasted good, the more I wanted of it too. So there was no control.
Right. And the taste, and I'm going to get your question, the taste, remember, it lights up that hypothalamus. It lights up that little reward center in our brain. So that's
Macaroni and cheese is
comfort.
X for me now.
Comfort.
Because
Right.
that was a comfort food.
Absolutely.
I was gonna comment on one of the girls over there had said something about, going out with people and they're saying they feel guilty and they don't wanna eat in front of you.
Right.
I've had kind of a similar experience with that with my husband because two things that we really enjoy going to do together on date night is to either go to a movie or go to the ballpark. And I found shortly after I had my surgery, he was kind of pulling back and saying, well, we shouldn't go do those things because those are food triggers for you. And I kind of had to learn to reframe that not only for me but for him and say, no, I can handle this, and just be intentional about packing some food for myself so that I had something there to eat and not be tempted to eat the things that you would get from a movie theater or a ballpark, which are not good for you.
Well said.
And the other thing I wanted to say too is not to be shy about using that card they give you, because the very first time we tried to go to the movie theater, I had my little cooler bag with my little containers in it, and an usher tried to stop me and tell me I couldn't bring my food in. And I just pulled my card out and I said, I'm bringing it. And I went in with my food, and I've done it every time since, and they don't stop me anymore. So.
It's such a great thing you're bringing up. I'm not sure if anybody remembers, I talk about the 3 Ps, P as a letter. I talk about the 3 Ps before and after surgery, and that is plan, portion, and protein, right? that's kind of your foundation. If you ever kind of know, what am I going to do tonight? If you think about those 3 P's, and you plan and you do portion and you do protein, that reminds me of that. That's a great comment. Yeah.
We were here several months ago when you spoke and told us about the 3 Ps.
Oh, okay.
I went home that night and made a poster and put it on our fridge, and it's been there ever since.
Oh my gosh, great.
And we live by that.
Live by
I
the-
also added 60, 60, 60.
Okay.
60 grams of protein, 60 ounces of water, and 60 minutes of movement.
I love it. That's great. That's great. That's wonderful. Yeah. Yeah.
60
For
minutes.
sure. So we talked about the 3 Ps. She has that on her fridge, plan, portion, protein. But then she has 60, 60, 60. 60 grams of protein, 60 or plus ounces of water, and 60 minutes of movement a day. 60, 60, 60. That's great. I like it. Yeah.
It's kind of on topic, but I have a question. I'm 2 weeks from Rue and Y, and I can't get past like 2 tablespoons of the protein, whether it's yogurt or cottage cheese.
You're
Is
on the
that
front end of
pretty
surgery.
normal? I had
2 weeks
had
ago.
it 2 weeks ago, yes.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah.
So I'm good.
Yeah.
You guys are talking about all these vegetables and
Yeah.
stuff. I'm like, I can't.
Your stomach's still swollen some. so,
Yeah, see, I
that's
go
tough.
eat, and everybody says, "Oh, I feel bad, don't eat
Yeah.
in front of me." I go, if I eat that, I'm gonna die because it will hurt so bad. When I tried my scrambled eggs, I thought someone was blowing a balloon up in my diaphragm, and I was like, no, I'm not doing this. I don't know how people can overeat, because I won't go through that pain again. Yes.
Like the fact that Dr. Sabapathy is talking about there, so take advantage of retraining yourself when you can't eat that.
Great points. Great points. Exactly. In the 2 to 3 to 4 week range, there may be still a little bit of inflammation or peeling, but we talk about 60 grams of protein a lot. In the front end, you're just moving towards that number. You're moving towards 60 grams.
It's very
of protein.
fearful to try anything new. It is for me. Does that sound stupid to you guys? Because of that pain.
Yeah.
Anything. I tried a little bit of fish last night. I guess I shouldn't have done that.
Fear can be a motivator.
And I was
Fear
like,
can, we can use fear to our advantage, and so sometimes
That's what I'm doing.
just the thought of that can be beneficial, and so absolutely. But I think a good point for those that are a little bit farther along, things can evolve and shift and change a little bit, so being prepared for that is a good thing too. Great points. Awesome. Any other thoughts on that? Don't want to miss any of their hands, because there's a couple more things I wanted to talk about, and gosh, I just love hanging out with you guys. Already 45 in, but I did want to talk a little bit about, since we use the codependency word, and we do talk a little bit about addiction transfer on the front end of surgery, and I don't really necessarily think we need to equate it tonight to chemical substances, but I think the thing that I like about this and the whole balance concept is you're probably gonna need something. If we overindulge in anything, we're gonna need something to balance that out. But I think the reason that's so important is it can even happen with things that we may not expect, like shopping or spending or things of that nature. So I just encourage you to watch for that a little bit as you go through it. I'm not sure. Yes.
I had something very emotional happen to me last night. I'm 5 weeks out of, I had the gastric bypass, and I felt myself say, I need to go eat somewhere or something, and I know I can't, and I couldn't. So I went shopping, and I filled up the entire cart, and I know about transfer addiction. I filled up the entire cart with clothes that fit 2 dresses inside the stand.
That's awesome. Yes.
And filled it up. And then I spent the rest of the time walking around the store putting it all back. I work for the county, so I can't buy all that.
It's
not gonna fit in a few weeks anyway.
Yeah, maybe even next week.
My shopping brain doesn't hear you.
It's a great example.
But I got behind from trying on clothes because it's been a long time since I tried on clothes and I felt good about something.
Yeah, that's right.
But I know myself. I know myself well enough
like the awareness word, the mindfulness. I like the example though because the brain, we're trying to be logical. We're trying to follow all the guidelines and do all the right things, but sometimes when that emotion strikes, it does elicit back to what's comfortable, what's familiar, right? And so we probably all see that if we have kids or grandkids, and so it's important now to find those new things that are comfortable, that are enjoyable. And this is going to sound maybe a little basic, but I found it to be very helpful, is write some of these things down, because when the brain gets really emotional and we get really emotional, our clarity of thought isn't quite as sound as we normally would like it to be. So if you have a cheat sheet, you can at least reference that and say, okay, I'm really struggling here, and certainly this is a place to talk about that. Coming back and chatting with me or Laura, our program is a place, family, friendly, support helps. Support helps. This has been so great. Is there any other comments or questions? Because I really do, I think one of the greatest things about this group, and people come back within a week after, if they attend group, and come back and tell me that this part is good and hearing someone talk is great, but you spending time with each other, so I want to make sure I allocate proper time for that. Yes?
Dr. Sabapathy, can you talk a little bit about cravings, because it's a topic that always comes to me.
Sure. Yeah.
And, you know, we understand that bariatric surgery in general can help with cravings, but there's a mental component that the surgery really doesn't, you know, resolve in a way.
Right.
And that's where, when it comes to cravings and food choices and eating, I always try to bring both things into the mix.
Sure.
Because I don't, for, you know, the ones that are getting ready for surgery that are here, you know, I want them to understand that craving concept, and I know that sooner or later that's going to come along.
It's a great point, thanks. I would love to talk about that. So cravings, right? So sometimes we have physical cravings that is generally built upon what is traveling through our bloodstream. So if we have a fair amount of sugar or a fair amount of carbs, a fair amount of anything that might come from a fat substance, if that's trending through our body, we may tend to want that. And I think about that as a physical craving. So if I have something like that at 8 p.m., why do I almost want it again at 8 p.m.? It's that physical craving. So remember, we're creatures of habit, right? So one thing that you all do so wonderfully is break sometimes years and decades of habits. The tricky part, and this kind of relates to the dependency term, because there's physical dependency, and then there's psychological dependency, and then there's both. I really think the surgery helps break some of the physical cravings and dependency. But the psychological cravings are a little trickier. And it's those moments that we have the stress or the strain that sometimes those psychological cravings want to come back. So when I think about that, and this is why we always talk about alternatives. You know why there was no school on Tuesday? There was no substitute teachers. They were not available. So the reason I bring that up is you have to have substitutes, right? We need to have, so when we're having cravings, and we know a lot of what our cravings are, it's kind of like a substitute teacher comes in when the main teacher can't be there. What are the alternatives and the substitutes that we can have to counteract those cravings? And if you have those in place and you kind of work with Laura, maybe myself as well, on the front end and start kind of trial and erroring some of those, even on the back end of surgery, because your blood chemistry is changing. I would probably propose too that your neurochemistry is changing. That's going to be some exciting research in the future. We think that this surgery is changing your neurochemistry in a good way to help reduce those physical and maybe psychological cravings. But those cravings will also develop based upon what those old the comfort carbs. I think I heard that, the comfort carbs. So we have to be mindful of those. And with the holidays coming up, some of those old cravings may want to come back. I know some people probably here bake a mean Christmas cookie or something, right? That is this once a year kind of wonderful treat, right? And, you know, so if you're in those situations, how do I continue to make those or give those as gifts or make changes? Maybe you're not going to make that, but if you do, how do you be cautious of those cravings? Because the time of year, the cold weather, what I've done the last 30 years, whatever, that's where those cravings want to come back. So I feel like those are things that you would want to be aware of and be mindful of, and that's why I think it's a good question, Laura. Yeah. Any comments on that? Has anybody else figured out a way to control cravings? Are you trying to approach things differently? Any other thoughts on that? Yeah.
I think I was really concerned with that because if there was anything close to an addiction, it was with soda pop. I wanted Pepsi or Coke, and how people say, oh, I can't drink Coke at night because it keeps me awake. I could drink a Coke and go to sleep 10 minutes later. It did not bother me at all. And so I was very concerned with that. And I stopped drinking. I started kind of dwindling down, and then about 3 weeks before the surgery, I just stopped cold turkey. And I haven't had any soda of any type since. I haven't even wanted it. And that was really a concern to me because I was afraid I would crave it. And I knew I shouldn't have it, and I was afraid I wouldn't be able to stay away from it. So I feel like that and like French fries and things like that, they have no interest anymore for them. And so I think that maybe is what you're talking about that I'm experiencing. I did like those things before, and now I just don't. So I'm so glad.
Yes, it's a great point. Soda, one thing about cravings that we want to be aware of too is the more chemically, potentially addicting a substance is, the harder it is to break that craving.
And that's what I was afraid of.
Right?
Right.
So soda, why is soda so chemically addicting potentially? It's got 3 things in it, whether it's bubbles, carbonation, caffeine, and sugar.
Yep.
And even the fake sugar, Laura could probably talk more eloquently about this than I, but even the artificial sugars, we're seeing some addictive potential properties in them. Maybe even more so, because if you compare the same amount of sugar to a same amount of sugar-free, the sugar-free is sweeter, and it can elicit a stronger response in the brain, and then we may want that more. So, great example. I got another hand back here. Yeah.
Oh, I'm 10 months out from RNY, and I do have cravings.
Yes. Okay.
Of course, I can't overeat. If I do, it hurts. So that's what happens. But I was craving something sweet at the store yesterday, and I've been trying to be mindful. Mindfulness is really good for me.
Good.
I mean, when we binge, we don't know what we're for dinner. But I just reminded myself that, whatever it was, candy bar or chips, I'm not going to feel better when I'm done with them.
Good. Okay.
It's not going to make me feel better when I'm done.
Yeah.
That whole hand and mouth and crunch or sweet, but not when I'm done. So I forgot about it. As soon as it was out of my mind, it was gone.
What a wonderful thing. I mean, I compliment you greatly on that. I think it's hard to be the student and the teacher, and you were in that moment, right? Because you kind of told yourself that this is not going to be, that would be like someone who very much cares about you and says, hey, this isn't going to make you feel any better afterwards, don't do it. But you did it to yourself. I mean, that's huge. I think that's what mindfulness is. Yeah. Go ahead.
Dr. Sabapathy, there was a book that you had recommended, Emotional First Aid.
Yeah, the Emotional First Aid Kit, a practical guide to life after bariatric surgery or
There was
something like that.
one sentence that stuck out more than anything else in that book, and it was, food is not your friend.
Right, food is not your friend.
And that really, I repeated that to myself over and over again. To overcome head hunkers, head cravings, because I needed to know that, and that's where I think a lot of us have gotten in trouble. Food becomes our friend, especially in times of stress. And I don't know, it was just that one phrase that stuck out the most to me.
Yeah, thanks for highlighting that book. I think it's a real good read. A lot of people say it might be a must read before surgery, and I think that food can become a friend-like experience. I mean, you don't have to really do anything for food. You don't have to get dressed up. You don't have to really do it. You can get it. You can deliver it in. You can go get it quickly. So food can quickly become a friend because it's comforting. And when we're going through something, we might call a friend, right? And that's a great alternative too. What are the other things we can do for those comforts? Thank you. Yeah.
Where does chocolate fit in on cravings and addiction?
Chocolate's pretty powerful, actually. Cocoa, right? So cocoa has has components of addictive properties. So chocolate is a tough one, and it's a slider food, I would think, in most cases, right? So it goes down easy. It goes down easy, that's right. So yeah. So sugar-free chocolate, it didn't do it for her, so why go there, right? Right?
Dark chocolate does.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. You know, I think it's a good point. I was talking about that earlier too with someone about chocolates, of course, and it's a hard one because it tends to, it is a slider food. You know, sometimes the concept, recognizing what it can do. I think you might want to look at chocolate this way. As you eat the protein and you do the 60-60-60, and you get your metabolism going up, we got to think about some of these foods that we brought up today, the chocolates, the sodas, the comfort carbs, they're going to bring your metabolism down. And we really want to keep our bodies heated up with protein, and think about the sugars as kind of cooling them down or slowing that blood circulation down. So think about certain things that maybe we had a certain affinity to, but at this point in our life, how we can look at them and see them a bit differently. Yeah.
You know, as far as the chocolate, we do the chocolate calcium tabs. And you know, we need to have 3 of those a day.
Correct. Chocolate calcium.
And spread them out.
Yep.
They're fabulous.
There you go.
If you haven't had those, do those.
Chocolate calcium, right? Some people talking about the chocolate shakes, you know, so finding other healthier alternatives that fall within the rubric of the guidelines of the surgery, and then it's a win-win. You guys are awesome. Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it so much.
I hope you get better. I know.
Why